Hi, my name is Sean Ruggiero, Corporate Advisor to Family First Life and President and Founder of SafeMoneySmart.org. We're going to talk today about Annuities 101. Let's start by talking about what is an annuity. An annuity is a contract. It's a contract with a legal reserve life insurance or annuity company and a contract owner, an annuitant, that's the person whose life it's based on, and then a beneficiary or multiple beneficiaries. These are held by legal reserve life insurance or annuity companies. So what is a legal reserve company? It's a company that has proven to each individual state, because these are state regulated, which we'll talk about, they've proven to each individual state in an independent third-party audit every year that they have at least $1 of assets for every $1 of liability. To have that, you must have a 100% solvency ratio. That's what qualifies you as a legal reserve entity in any state that you do business. So here we have a very solvent, qualified, state-regulated company that we have a contract with. Now, the form of that contract we're going to talk about in Section 2, which is types of annuities. But one of the things I wanted to point out is that these are state-regulated, okay? They're regulated by the state individually, all 50 states. This is not a federally regulated product. That makes people feel normally pretty good about it because the state has the state residents' intentions versus trying to manage the intentions of the entire country. Furthermore, there is a guarantee fund set up for every single state. Now that guarantee fund will vary. Some of them are $250,000. Some of the others are as high as $500,000. So not only do they have to be a legal reserve company that has a solvency ratio of at least 100%, so they have $1 of assets for every $1 of liability, but they also have to pay into a state guarantee fund. So these makes these contracts rock solid, very sound investment alternatives for the consumers that are looking for safe growth, lifetime income, or a combination of both. So the next thing we're going to talk about is types of annuities. All right, so now we're going to talk about types of annuities. We talked about what an annuity is, a contract with a legal reserve life insurance or annuity company, solvency ratios of 100% or more, and backed and guaranteed at the state level. So now the types of annuities, there's three basic types of annuities: fixed annuities, income annuities, and something called FIAs or fixed index annuities. Let's dissect these a little bit more. A fixed annuity is just that. Fixed annuities have been around for a long time. They're also known as MYGAs, M-Y-G-A, which stands for Multi-Year Guaranteed Annuity. These MYGAs can be as short as 3 years, all the way up to 7 or even 10 years. The longer you go, the higher the yield in most situations. And these are just straightforward investments similar to a CD. Okay, when I say similar to a CD, people are purchasing CD or certificates of deposit because they want a safe investment. They want relatively easy liquidity. They want no severe penalties, no risk, and they want it to be easy. Walking down to the bank or credit union and getting a CD. They're also considered fairly short-term investments. So a 3-year CD, a 5-year CD, the idea that you're not putting this money in for a long horizon of investment period. The difference between a fixed annuity or MYGA and a CD is really twofold. First, the fixed annuity or MYGA is designed to outperform a CD. So if a CD is going to get you, let's say, 2.5% on a 5-year chassis, or maybe 1.75%, a fixed index annuity or a fixed annuity will get you probably a 0.5 point or even 1 point higher. It will vary based on the bond investments that they're making in this. And that's simply what it is. It's just a investment by the insurance and annuity company that's backed and guaranteed. And if they say, I'm going to do a 3-year, multi-year guaranteed annuity, it means, and let's say it's paying 2.5%, it's going to pay you 2.5% the first year. That interest will compound and add to the next year, where it pays another 2.5%. The tax and interest will defer to the next year, where it pays another 2.5%. And then you can cash out the CD, or the annuity. Most fixed annuities will allow you to take out 10% penalty-free during the time that the annuity is running. So that's a fixed annuity. Very vanilla, very black and white type of annuity. Then let's go to the income annuities. The income annuities are probably the oldest form of annuities in existence. When we talk to clients, especially baby boomers or even older people than that, you'll see that this is what they think of when they think of an annuity. And it's oftentimes wrought with a lot of ignorance. It's not how these things work anymore. But a SPIA and a DIA are essentially the same annuity. They're designed for lifetime income. That lifetime income is either immediate or deferred. So a SPIA is a single premium immediate annuity, and then a DIA is a deferred income annuity. Very simply put, it's using an internal rate of return plus something called mortality credits. Mortality credits are the older that you are, the bigger piece of the pie you get. So if we took a $100,000 annuity and we put it into a SPIA and it has an internal rate of return of, let's say, 2%, then this $100,000 on average would return about 2% over the course of the SPIA. But that isn't linear. If someone is 60, 70, or 80, they're going to get more income on top of the interest based on their age, that mortality crediting. If we say the average person is going to live to 85, and you start at 75 with your SPIA, it's going to give you bigger chunks of payments. If you start your SPIA at age 61, your payments are smaller, but they will go for a longer period of time. Whether it is a deferred, meaning you're going to take this out in a year or more, or if it's immediate, meaning you have 30 days to start taking it up to a year, these are designed for lifetime income. So the lifetime income is the key factor that make these popular. Now, what makes these unpopular is that ignorance we're talking about with clients. They've always felt that if they put in $100,000, let's say at age 61, and they live to average age of death, they might get all their money back plus some interest return. If they live longer, let's say to age 95, now they've really hit the jackpot, if you will, because they're continuing to get payments beyond that average age of death. But what if? What if they die tragically at age 74, right here? Then the rest of that money disappears. That's not true. For a long time now, insurance companies have offered alternatives to just losing all the money if you don't live long enough. So SPIAs and DIAs, income annuities, no other investment out there. No stocks, no bonds, no ETFs, no real estate, nothing out there has mortality crediting. And that's one of the key things that make income annuities so special and still one of the more popular types of annuities that are out there today. The last type of annuity we're going to talk about is called a fixed indexed annuity. Relative to all other annuities, even variable annuities that came out in, say, 1954, the FIA is the new kid on the block. The fixed indexed annuity is about 22, 23 years old, which in financial product terms is very young. But it does some fantastic things very well. It's really changing the landscape of how annuities are sold, how they're purchased, and how they're utilized for retirement income, pre-retirement, retirement, and late retirement income planning. The first thing is the idea that it's a fixed annuity. So the base DNA of the fixed index annuity is a fixed annuity. The difference is that instead of giving you a 2.5%, 3% return, whatever it might be, those guaranteed returns are put into index options. And these indexes could be something as simple as the S&P 500 or things as complex as a volatility-controlled Janus consensus index. So the fixed index annuity is combining two things, which gives you the safety of a fixed annuity, but it gives you much higher upside potential if an index moves north. We've seen crediting statements where people are getting 16, 20, 40% in a 2-year period. Now, that is not normal, but to know that you can gain those types of potentials, which are much higher, and all you're offsetting is the chance that you might get a 0 in a given year, that's what makes these FIAs so popular. Now, a standard FIA, and you're going to see the rising popularity of FIAs used for accumulation, which is different. Annuities were primarily sold for income or very short-term investments. Now, as an accumulation product, they're becoming more and more powerful and very, very popular. And then as an income product, just like we spelled out here, including mortality credits, rather than cashing in your entire $100,000 to turn income on at a certain age, you can now take, let's say you had $100,000 of a fixed index annuity, you can add an income rider to it. So we're going to add this income rider, and without giving up all your liquidity, you can give yourself a guaranteed lifetime income stream. Now, dollar to dollar, a SPIA or DIA will always pay a higher amount, sometimes only slightly higher amount as far as guaranteed income than an FIA with an income rider. But to offset that, you still have access to your cash, which is still accumulating value. So it gives you a lot of options that you wouldn't have had with a SPIA or a DIA, which is why it's becoming so popular both as an income tool and as accumulation tool. So again, the 3 basic types of annuities, and notice we've omitted variable annuities. Those are a securities investment. We do not teach or train or sell those. But we have our fixed annuities, we have our income annuities, both SPIAs and DIAs, and then we have our fixed index annuities, which for Family First Life is the primary product, and for Safe Money Smart, it is the flagship product that we are trying to bring to the forefront, to the understanding of the retirement community on the power of a fixed index annuity, and you can use them for both accumulation and income. So the next thing we're going to talk about is, how does indexing work? Okay, let's talk about how does indexing work. We explained the 3 types of annuities, the MYGAs or fixed annuities. Talked about the income annuities, the SPIAs and DIAs, and now the one that is really catching the retirement world by storm, and that is the fixed indexed annuity. So in order to understand a fixed indexed annuity, we need to understand how indexing works. So let's say we have a $100,000 investment year one. One investor puts their money in the S&P 500. The other investor puts their money in a fixed index annuity that is indexed against the S&P 500. Now, let's say this is 1998, and the market goes up. And then 99 it goes up, in 2000 it goes up. But then what happened in 2001? Dropped way down with the dot-com bubble bursting. It then came back up 2, 3, 4, all the way up to say 2008, and then it came back down. So this is not to scale, this is not representative of the exact returns, but if we follow what happened from the early 2000s into 2010, we see that the markets, of course, went up and went down, and you're always going to experience that volatility in the markets. They do not go up in perpetuity. So now let's look at a fixed index annuity. The simplest way to put it, and this can be done with things called caps, which are seldom used anymore, or let's say they're used far less. It can be done with spreads, and it can be done with participation rates. To explain those very quickly, I'll show you right here. If the market went up 10% and you had a 5% cap, here's the market going up 10%, it caps it at 5. If you have a spread of, let's say, 2%, and the market goes up 7%, then the first 2% is paid to the annuity company, and the rest is paid to you. The spread comes first versus the cap caps it. And then think of participation rate as a percentage of that index going up. So participation rate can be 50%, so you get half of whatever the index does. It could be 115%. Believe it or not, you can actually have a participation rate that's higher than what the index returns. So if it was 115%, it would be all of it plus a little bit more. So just quick review: caps, spreads, participation rate. So with this situation here, we're going to simulate one of these things here, which are essentially limiting how much you receive of that index. You don't get every gain of the index and no downside loss. You get some of the gains. So if the market's going up, so is the fixed index annuity to a point. Goes up again to a point, goes up again to a point. Now, when the market comes down, since you never have downward crediting because you're not directly involved or invested in the index, rather than losing money, it goes level. So all this time that the stock market has dropped, here the fixed index annuity has stayed the same. In fact, some FIAs have guaranteed 1% no matter what the market does. Now, as the market comes back up, so does the fixed index annuity to a point. Now, let's say we get here and the FIA, because it never lost that upward motion, it has locked in the gains every single year, that when the market tanks again, the FIA levels out. So if we look at this in a somewhat hypothetical situation, this $100,000 has doubled to $200,000. We're over here, we might be at $105,000. Why? Just because that's what the market value of this, not talking about any dividend payouts, but the market value of this stock is subject to what the value is at that current time, versus the idea of, and I always like to use a padlock, of locking in gains every single time that you have an up market. So if my gains are locked in or realized, when the market goes down, I don't lose them because they are locked in. They carry right over to the next time that the market goes up, and now those gains are locked in again, locked in again, locked in again, so on and so forth. Why is that imagery so powerful? The idea of locking in gains. The most powerful thing about indexing is not the fact necessarily that you don't receive downward crediting. The most powerful thing about indexing is the fact that every year there is a gain, you lock it in. And that locking in had nothing to do with selling stocks or bonds. It's just accumulating more cash on top of the cash that you invested. Now let's look at the flip side of that. If my brother put money into the stock market here and 4 years into it, he's got, let's say, $25,000 more, he's feeling pretty good about his investment. But here's the truth. He has $25,000 more, which are unrealized gains. He hasn't sold anything. In order to capture that, he would have to sell. For my gains, even though they're $25,000 behind, I didn't have to sell anything and they're locked in. So lo and behold, a bear market takes shape. He drops all the way down to $83,000 from his high water mark, which was maybe $150,000. Has he lost that money? Nope. And that's the vicious cycle. We never want to sell at the high point because we're getting greedy, and then we never want to sell at the low point because we feel like we're going to lose all those gains. The unfortunate thing is that when people sell is normally not under the control. Medical issues, forced retirement, RMDs, emergency costs, that's when people are locking in their gains or losses when it comes to the market. So it's important to understand the psychology of this. Everybody out there is trying to buy low and sell high, but the reality is you only capture those gains when you sell those units, and seldom to never are you going to buy it at the exact low and sell it at the exact high. On the other hand, indexing takes that stress away. You're never having to sell units, and if the market goes up, you make gains, you lock those gains in, And if the market goes down, since they're locked in, you lose nothing. So that is the power of indexing. The next thing we're going to talk about is fees versus costs. So we talked about how indexing works. We talked about locking in those gains, realized gains without having to sell units or having what they call unit depletion, versus the stock market, although it can have large gains, unless you sell, you're not locking them in. So the power of indexing. Now we need to look at fees and costs, or fees versus costs. All right, there are two types of funds. All right, now the reason I say funds is because in most situations, for a retirement account, a money manager is not going to pick individual stocks. If they do, it's going to be a small part of the portfolio. Most of these are in mutual funds. Okay, mutual funds, ETFs, bond funds, things that spread out that risk a little bit, because we want low risk or less risk as we get into retirement. So if we look at a mutual fund, most mutual funds are going to have the following. They're going to have a load fee of some sort. It could be A shares, B shares, or C shares. A shares, the load fee is all up front, let's say 5%. B shares, maybe it's a deferred load where you pay 2% up front and 2% on exit. And then C shares, it's all on the exit when you sell it. Okay, so let's say you have to spend 2% when you sell the stock. Now, a mutual fund also has something called 12B-1 fees. They're usually about 0.25%. What are they for? Overhead, expenses. They are a true cost. And then on top of that, we have expense ratios, which just like 12B-1 fees are due every single year. So these never stop. There is an eternal charge of 12B-1 and expense ratios, and the average expense ratio is usually around 1%. These can vary. But if you have 1% plus 0.25% that's charged every single year, and you paid 5% just to get in the fund, here's where I always differentiate the idea of a fee versus a cost. Is this, and this a fee? Well, a cost is something that if you give that money, you get something in return. A fee is something that if you give that money, you get nothing in return. So since the 12B-1 fee, the expense ratio, and the load fee, the commission, none of those give you any sort of guarantee or any sort of preferential treatment within this mutual fund versus anyone else who has invested. Everybody pays. That's how the company makes their money. It is a fee. But let's look at costs now. Let's look at an FIA. Now let's say that this FIA, or fixed index annuity, has an optional charge of 95 basis points every year. For that 95 basis points, you get a larger bonus up front. You get increased liquidity, meaning you can access more of the money without penalty, and maybe even other features. Or let's say for 1% every year, you get to add on an income rider that guarantees you X% of your money that you can take for life, for you or for your spouse. And there are many sorts of these costs that are optional when we purchase FIAs. Now notice I said cost and notice I said optional. See, the difference between a fee and a cost is that a cost is one, optional, you don't have to have it, and two, when you make this purchase or this purchase, you get something for it. That's a key difference. So, when we look at the world of mutual funds, with the idea that our gains are not locked in until we sell, there is no guarantee that it goes up, there's no guarantee that it won't go down, and we have things like expense ratios, 12B-1 fees charged every year, and some sort of commission load, especially on managed funds, of 5%, 2%, 2% on the exit, whatever it might be, and we get nothing for it. No guarantees, no extra features. We compare that to FIAs, where these costs are on optional things that you get something for your money. So that is, in conclusion, why I say FIAs have costs, not fees. And that's a big difference when we look at how fees can erode someone's retirement, oftentimes without them even knowing it. So the last thing we're going to talk about today is understanding the surrender charges. All right, last thing we're going to talk about today is understanding surrender charges. If something is too good to be true, it's not true. So how are we presenting something that allows us to capture upside gains, realize those gains, lock them in without having to sell off units? We are completely risk-free from negative crediting. So if the market moves down, if the index moves down, you don't receive negative crediting. And oftentimes we have transfer bonuses. They'll give you 5% for transferring when you take your money from one account over to an FIA. How can we have all these good things, right? No fees, no downside risk, some of these things averaging 6, 7, even 8% per year, plus a transfer bonus? What's the downside? Come on, if we're doing a good job at sales, we know that we have to be able to, as I always say, explain the yin with the yang. So the way this is done is through surrender charges. Liquidity is key. The annuity company has billions and billions of dollars that they can place. They have an advantage over any individual investor. An annuity company can take $10 million blocks, $20 million blocks, and get better yields, more frequent coupon payments, or better option prices for these fixed index annuities. What they can't do, especially because they're paying for their overhead costs, they're paying for commissions to agents, they can't put the money in and then allow the person to take the money out the next year or the next 2 years or 3 years. So that's where the surrender charge schedule comes up. So what I've done here is I've laid out kind of a hypothetical but very typical surrender charge on a 7-year FIA or annuity product. So you'll see years 1, 2, 3, all the way to 7. And then you're going to see a corresponding decreasing percentage next to each of those years. 10%, 8, 6, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So what does this mean? Well, most annuities, FIAs, will allow you to take anywhere from 5 to 10% out every year completely free of charge. So if I had a $100,000 investment, and let's say the first year it gained $5,000 or 5%, I now have $105,000 of accumulated value. I can take out, let's say, 10%. So I can take out $10,500 without any issues whatsoever. But let's say I need to buy a car, and the car costs $12,500. So I need to take out an additional $2,000 that year. This $2,000, not the entire $10,500, because remember the 10% was free. You could take that out without penalty. But the additional $2,000 that you took out is subject to a 10% penalty. So if we look at it as a 10% penalty, we're saying that they're going to keep $200, you're going to get $1,800. So out of the $12,500 you took out, they keep $200 because $2,000 of it was over the 10%. Now let's run this same scenario. Let's run this same scenario year 5. Let's say this $100,000 has grown all the way to $150,000 through our indexing, through locking in gains and never having any fees and never having any downward crediting. So if we have $150,000 and we can take out 10%, that's $15,000. Now let's say we need to pay for our granddaughter's college, and it's $17,000. Remember, the first 15 or 10% penalty free, but the remaining $2,000, if we bring that forward, $2,000, 2%, because we're in year 6. So they keep $40, not $200, $40, because it's gone from a 10% penalty down to a 2%. So what you see here is you see the annuity company saying, hey, these first few years that we have the money invested are very critical. We need to get the yields back that we've made on these investments in order to pay out the commissions and cover our overhead. As the annuity goes on, it becomes less and less restrictive. And then once you get into year 8, there is no surrender charge whatsoever. You could take out the entire $150,000 or $200,000 or whatever it's grown to, and you would have 0 penalty due to a surrender charge. So, understanding the yin to the yang, this is very important to explain to clients so they understand both why they're going to be suitable and what they're getting into. Now, a quick note about suitability. Most annuity companies don't want to have more than 50% of someone's net worth with their company and annuity. Why? Because they need to make sure they have excess reserves to compensate for emergencies. The other thing is they're going to have some percent of liquid assets, which is very important when we're doing annuity planning. I don't know how many times I've worked with clients who have, say, $300,000 that they want to invest in annuity. But when we look at their stage of life, how many grandkids, kids, their activeness, we might suggest that we only put $250,000 into the annuity because that leaves them an additional $50,000 outside of the annuity that they can use for liquidity. I hope this helps today. Appreciate you all spending some time with me. We'll have some more videos coming out training you on annuities, FIAs, annuity sales, and how to help your clients. Thank you.